All right, next, I think one of the worries of every parent who has more than one child worries about the siblings. Are they going to still like us when a lot of our attention is to someone who has Duchenne? Are they going to be failures, successful? Do we need them to stay home and do all the care? Do we use them as our right arm? I remember just looking at my girls as saviors, help me with this. So we have a couple siblings here that are going to introduce themselves, that are going to talk about exactly those things. So these are wonderful sibs, and go. Go up there. Thanks. All right, you're up.
Did not expect to see
Hi, everyone. Dylan, kick us off.
Yeah. Hey everyone, my name is Dylan Malone, and I'm one of the siblings coordinator for Sibs Connect.
Hi, everyone. My name is Abbie. Killian, my brother Sam has Duchenne, and I'm also one of the siblings group coordinators.
Hi, my name is Oliver Castle. I have a brother with Duchenne as well, and I'm also one of the coordinators.
My name is Kat, and I also have a brother with Duchenne who's 28, and I actually now work for PPMD.
So I think what we've found as we have been building this community specifically for siblings within the larger PPMD community, we all know that this community is so important for parents. It's so important for the boys with Duchenne. And we have discovered for ourselves that it's so important for the siblings too. So we've been really making an effort to build that, and we've talked to many of your kids without Duchenne so far this weekend and in the past couple years, and we're looking forward to continuing to do that. But I think what we want to do is also give some space to tell you what we wish you do as parents, now that we're a little older, some of us a lot older, but we've had some time to think about that. And so we hope this will be helpful to you, and really I think what this will be is just a conversation among ourselves about things we talk about all the time, and hopefully it's helpful to you as well. So.
Yeah, so let me kind of set the ground a little bit. So why we have Sibs Connect now. This is my third or fourth conference, but it's my second conference in person. And I remember at the first conference, I met a couple of siblings that were a little bit older, Sky and Alana. And I was, let's see, what was 4 years? I was 18 at the time, I think, and they were a little bit older, but we just hit it off. And it was as if we had known each other for 3 years instead of 3 minutes, really. And so made those connections, then COVID happened. Then we started doing online sessions, and we were doing some Sibs work through there. I think I was on a panel for one of those. And I realized, I was like, okay, what can we do to get siblings more involved? Because like Abbie said, it's, parents have something, the boys obviously have something. What do siblings have? And so I met with Ryan and Nicole, and I was like, can we get together a group, kind of like a coordinators group, but just for siblings, run by siblings, and no real interaction from the outside in. So like our Facebook group is locked and it's just for siblings, so that it's a nice safe space for everyone to talk to and complain or celebrate or things like that. So that's kind of where we are today.
Yeah. And I think one thing we found too is when you're talking to your kids that don't have Duchenne, I think a lot of times the inclination can be to protect them, as you should, but I think what happens is they know that something is different, they know that something is happening, but they don't know what that is. And so I think one thing just to kind of kick off some of the things we have to tell you is honesty and transparency are your greatest strengths. And age appropriate, it's up to each of you to figure out what's appropriate at what time for your kids. But I think, the inclination to protect can sometimes mean that they don't know where to go with their questions, or they don't know who to ask or how to talk to you about it. And I think that's really where you're going to get the points where they have questions, and points where you can reshape worries that they have and reframe those. And so I think that's one thing that my parents did, was be very open and transparent from the beginning. And you know, it wasn't everything at once, but you know, at least then I knew what was going on. I knew what was happening, and I knew that it was an open dialogue, and I could come to them as I got older and learned more things. As my brother got older and more things started happening, you know, that can be really scary, a really scary time to watch unfold. And so to know immediately where to go with those questions, and that my parents were going to answer those questions for me, I think was really helpful. The other thing now too, with Google and with school and things like that, they can find that information on their own. And so it's helpful, you know, for it to come from you. And that way that information can come from a reputable source, and you can frame it the way that's going to be best for your family and your kids from the beginning. So I don't know if anyone wants to jump in on that point, or has other things.
I told a sibling literally 20 minutes ago, Google can be wrong. I mean, we just heard from Dr. Villa all the new things that are going on with cardiac, and that's something that I can almost guarantee you Google has not picked up on yet. You know, it's going to conferences like these where you get the latest and greatest information, and so Google can be wrong and it can be scary. So definitely, if there's questions that need to be asked, and I mean, I've done it, I Google it, and it's scary. So being able to come to your parent and talk about that is definitely a huge relief.
Google can also be full of 1,000 not credible doctors, just like everyone will WebMD something when they have some sort of illness, and yet then we all come out with some weird diagnosis. But it was really interesting because we were just in one of the first siblings track sessions, at least since I've come back into conference. It was really interesting because it was a lot of their first conferences too. So they might have known other families with someone with Duchenne, but they hadn't been in a space like this before, where we've talked about having this like shared language, where you sort of just connect on this level that you don't have outside of this community because you just get it. So it was really cool and interesting to hear what they had to say as well. And looking back on times when we were younger, it was like, yeah, I didn't know who to talk to about this, or just having feelings about like what the future holds. And I think it's a lot when someone frames it a certain way, because we should all be living life as if nothing is guaranteed. But I think we've come to see that there's this narrative that's written for us that a life isn't guaranteed beyond a certain point. But that's how it is for all of us. So it was interesting to talk to someone else about that today too.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to that idea of community, which, you know, we all have by virtue of being in this room. But I think, you know, sometimes for the siblings, it can be, I don't want to say an afterthought, but it's not the main goal. And I think, you know, for us, we found ways to build that community, and we're trying to do that in a way that is very natural and organic now. But I think, like you said, the shared language, it just makes it easier, and it means that you get a different perspective that you wouldn't get, but you also get to talk about, you know, whatever is bothering you and whatever, you know, you're thinking of that's not your parent, that's not your sibling. It's somebody else that you can talk to that has, you know, knows what you're going through and has that objective kind of view for you too.
And you have this comfortability. Like, I'm so glad that I was able to be involved with this community early on, because I've known Abbie and the Killian family for a very long time at some capacity. But it was really cool because now that we're older, I've known them for a long time, but I took my brother, who's 28, to DC this past October, and it was I just messaged Abbie. I probably hadn't talked to her in years, and I just messaged her because I was like, I know someone that lives in this city. Like, okay. So we got together, and all of the little nuances, when you go out to, when you're traveling or go out to lunch or whatever you're doing, like making sure that you have handicapped bathrooms, some sort of accessible transportation, like these little things you might not think about when it's just yourself. We ran into a couple hiccups, but
We overcame them. Everything was fine.
Yeah.
I don't think no outing has ever gone just perfect. I think there's always going to be like 1 or 2 hiccups. And that's mostly my foot getting run over, but I want to consider that a major hiccup.
Yeah. But those are things you have to think about, and I forget about that stuff sometimes, especially if I'm not, if I'm not at home living in it, it's not top of mind, or it's compounded. Like all of a sudden everything went from, okay, we're at this base level to now, oh, there's been a significant amount of changes, and I now have to adapt to that.
Yeah.
So
I think
there's an
it's so
adaptation on your lifestyle too.
Yeah, but I think it's so helpful to have seen other people adapt to that, and I think your brother is a little older than mine, and we've gone through things at a different pace, but we've been able to kind of share that over the years and go through that together. So
Yeah.
I think something else, especially kind of going back to changes over the years, something else that I think is really helpful is as we've gotten older, and I think Oliver, you can speak really well to this, we've gotten older, we have to make choices for ourselves, but as we're part of a family, we have to make those choices, and for Duchenne families, we have many more factors that go into those choices. So for me, when I was deciding where to go to school, I had to decide whether to go off, to some college far away. It was Missouri. It's not that far. But had to decide whether to do that or stay local. And, that's something that you have to decide as a family, but that was me deciding my future and deciding what to do. And so that was a hard, decision for me. It was, definitely a conversation I had with my family, too, of like, I know we're part of a family. I know that there are times where I have to step up and help out. And, I think my parents always made clear to me that I was a sibling first and a caregiver when absolutely needed. And so, but there are times when I was needed. And so it was all of those factors coming together to make a decision. And I think what was helpful was having those open conversations with my family as I kind of went through these life stages, and knowing, and it looks different for every family, but knowing that I was making the choice for myself, and doing what, my future needed me to do, and knowing that I would always, go home to my family when I needed to. But I know, Oliver, you had kind of a similar discussion too.
Yeah, so I just got back from NAU, and I only spent a semester there, but there were a lot of heavy emotions and thoughts that I had to dwindle on, and I also had to find out what was important to me, and a lot of people just don't know. So that was a hard thing to, on the fly, figure out. Do I want to stay around my brother and be there for every second of his life, or can I go off and try to make things out for myself?
And I don't think we're here to tell you there's an easy answer to that conversation, but I think it is something that comes up as you get older, and I think depending on how it is for your family, I think you need to make clear that that's an okay thing to do, and I think that's something that's really hard to verbalize. I'm sure Oliver feels the same, but it was really hard for me to say, hey, I don't want to choose this school because that's too far away, and that is scary because I don't want to leave my brother, I don't want to leave my family. But I think if you know going into that is a consideration, that's maybe something they have in their back of their mind, and they don't even know. I think that's really important to bear in mind and to have that conversation maybe earlier than you think you need to. But I know for Duchenne families, the future is always scary, and it's always an unknown, and so it's just something that I think was really helpful, for our families.
Do you think you both made those decisions on your own? Like you made the decision to go to the school that you did or to come home when you did, like all on your own? Or other people were pressuring you to do that, whatever the decision was?
I think it was a bit of both. I think on a level, you talk yourself into it, but at the end of the day, you're just going on a whim, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's you take in input But at the end of the day, it was, what I decided to do for my future. And I mean, I did it again. I moved to DC, which is very far from Texas. So, it was like, that's where I knew my future was going to be. And so that's what I needed to do. But I knew there were a lot of factors that went into that too.
I got lucky. My college was 2 hours away, and it's the college that my girlfriend wanted to go to, and thankfully I fell in love with it when I went to visit it. But I was back and forth when I could make it. However, first night of college was hard. I cried myself to sleep because I felt like I was letting my family down, and I was leaving them and not being able to help them. My dad just got rotator cuff surgery, so he was in the sling and sleeping in a chair, and my mom had to do it all, and here I was about to start this next 4-year journey and leaving the house not the way that I thought should be left, honestly, because I am a caregiver and I wanted to help my mom, but eventually I kind of came to the realization that it's something that I need to do, and since then I've graduated, so as of May, and then I'm about to start grad school, thankfully, in Jackson, so I'll be living at home, but also taking on that caregiver role again.
I think it might be helpful, Dylan, if you tell the room what you're doing with your future.
Oh, yeah. So I got my bachelor's in microbiology, and then I'm working on grad school for biomedical sciences, and then from there, med school, hopefully. So fingers crossed that, thank you all. Fingers crossed it all goes well with that, but it's interesting because, Oliver, you just got EMT certified, and you want to be a paramedic, and yeah. My sister is a nurse, so it's interesting how you're doing advocacy in DC,
health
and
policy. You're
working for PPMD, so it's all connected one way or another. Being a sibling is definitely what's the way to put this? It's as much as a part of our individual lives as it is our family lives. And there's something that's always going to bring us back in, whether that be medicine or advocacy or working with PPMD. There's something that's always going to bring us back in.
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier at lunch, I think, too, of like, it just changes the trajectory of your life. And yeah, it's really tough and it's really hard to see your family go through that. But I think we've all ended up doing something that's really impactful for us, and I'm not sure that I would be where I am if it wasn't for the impact that Duchenne has on my life, and that can be negative and that can be positive, and I think there's a balance to that, but just to point out that there are some good things that can come from this, and your kids with Duchenne can end up doing some really amazing things, and your kids without Duchenne can end up doing some really awesome things too, and it's all, it all goes back to Duchenne. It's not in spite of, sometimes it's because of, but it can be really positive because of that too.
So I have a little different of opinion on the framing of that.
Okay.
We've talked about this a little bit in the past, but there's always this conversation that comes up where, do you think, or we've been asked the question, do you think you would be doing what you are because your sibling has Duchenne, or because Duchenne is a factor in your life? I could ask that same question to every single person in this room about all the decisions and the life changes they've made, right? Because these are just the factors that were put in front of me. I have no idea what life would have brought towards me had Duchenne not been in my life. And it's the same thing, like, I could have not touched this space whatsoever, right?
Yeah.
But I did, and I was introduced to it because my brother has Duchenne. But I wouldn't say that I went down this avenue because of Duchenne. It's like giving Duchenne too much weight in someone's identity. Mm-hmm. It's a factor of their life. It's not who they are as an individual. And that's just my take on it, because I think there's a lot of framing that goes into giving Duchenne an identity rather than seeing it as like, this is a factor in someone's life, and these are all the things that can go around it or that need to be considered with it on how you choose to live. And so we've talked about, this question always gets brought up, so that's why.
It's the different opportunities that are given.
Yeah, But it's different perspectives, and
Yeah, it's
you know,
just
we
different.
can all have the same thing happen to us and come at it from such a different way. And I feel very lucky that we can like be in the same room together and have such different takeaways, but still kind of the
Yeah.
same.
Just like when we were in that session before and
Mm-hmm.
someone wanted to be able to plan the next couple of years.
Right. And
Whereas
have that information.
I thought that was exhausting because if I had to, someone had said something to me a couple weeks ago and it really stuck with me because dying for 30 years is a really long time. But that's, if you are living life to that extent, you're constantly giving everything you have because you were given this timeline that doesn't realistically exist because no one can tell you something like that. Whereas, for example, I got injured all the time. I might get injured on this stage. And I will probably, I skydive, do all sorts of activities, but I'll probably get hurt like walking across the street. Whereas my brother was given this diagnosis where they put a timestamp on his life expectancy. So if I live life not taking every day or every moment as value, but these next 30 years or next 10, 15 years as value, like I'm going to exhaust myself. And then what happens next when all of a sudden that time clock comes up? And it's different perspectives.
Yeah, I think I was kind of the same way. I remember when she brought that up, I was thinking about, you know, how I had that. For me, it was the age for Adam was 18. And it's because that's what Google said. And that's why I told her Google is wrong. Google is not your best friend always. But now Adam is about to celebrate his 21st birthday and is taking us all to DC because he wants to go wine tasting. So the Baptist family is about to go wine tasting, but that's what he wants to do, and he's able to do it. And you know, it's something that the doctors in Jackson said he probably couldn't do. And so, you know, he said, "All right, I'm going to prove you wrong." So yeah.
God, I love being proven wrong. It's great. But that's the thing is there's so much empowerment that can go on in conversation. And I'd love to move away from this is this terrible thing in life because everyone's, in my perspective, everyone's dealt a deck of cards and you're going to choose what you want to do with them. So I would hope if I wish at this point I had a really good analogy about cards, but as you can tell, I don't. But I wish I was dealt a hand or I could then play a bunch of these cards where I would just be very successful. But I also don't know anything about cards, so that failed. But to that extent, we're all dealt a deck of cards, and I just want to make good decisions with the ones that I have, or decisions that are good for me, because for everyone, they're different. And if we've learned anything talking to each other or talking to other people, Duchenne is very different for everyone individually as well. And then in respective to everyone's families and their own family dynamics. So I've found that we have this great shared language because we can respect the differences, but also because of that, respect everyone's different perspectives.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think what really always seals it for me is the fact that I don't have to explain what Duchenne is over and over and over again here, because everyone knows here what it is. We all know the impact it has on us individually. We all know, you know, we don't have to beat it to death and explain it. We can start from somewhere higher than I can with most other people outside of the community. And I think that's really valuable, and that's something really important that we can all share, and that it's, you know, especially important for siblings who, you know, it's not easy to explain it to your friends, you know, that your brother has this disease and here's what it is, and, you know, here's all the details you need to know. But it's so much nicer to just have that shared language, like you said.
Yeah. And you don't have to worry. What also is great is you don't have to worry about someone awkwardly then asking you, is it okay if I ask you this question? Because
We just
ask the question.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think we just got the 5-minute warning. So speaking of questions, does anyone have any questions for us that you feel like you want to know about your sibling, and while you're able to ask it, I guess?
So this is going to be as much of a comment, and you guys hit on it a couple of times, right? When most of us who are our age were growing up, how did we find our information, right? We went to Encyclopedia Britannica, right? And so as we have actually, with the CDCC grant, we actually went and asked some of the men what they were doing, and that Wikipedia thing is a real problem, right? Because they Google it or they do that, and the information on there is just flat out wrong. And that impacts siblings, that impacts the boys and men, it impacts the people they're trying to explain it to, their friends, their dates, their other stuff. And so we need to create a resource that, one, reflects what we know today and what we don't know. So that timeline is a big deal, right? The number of people who said, one, they were told they were going to be passed away by this point, who are now asking me, can I have alcohol and is that okay for my heart? Which is an awesome conversation to have, actually, for Adam. It's awesome, right? So those are the things that are terrific. But one of the things that we've also learned over the last, decade is if we don't fill that space with real information, somebody else will fill it with awful information that is often untrue. So we as a community actually have to come together, neurologists, pulmonologists, cardiologists, PM&R. We have to give you a resource to do that because you guys are amazing. You're trying to fill that in, but we need to make it easier for you because it's happening whether we want to talk about it or not, and we have to do better at that.
Yeah. And I think, we're at the point in our lives where we can kind of sit down and do some research and try to get some, more connections and independent thoughts. But for the younger guys and younger siblings, their main priority right now is to be a kid and try to get into high school with good grades. So they don't need to be worried about all this wrong information and having that kind of pushed on them. They just need to enjoy their life and be a kid, really. So that's really important, that communication.
But beyond that, so I think too, what's really important is beyond getting information, it's feeling comfortable with what's presented to you. I don't think that it's best for anyone to wake up questioning every single day what the day will bring, right? Yeah. You can look at each day with two different lenses, and I think that's where, at least that's what I took away from that session that we just had. It was really important for people to not be so scared and have that weighing on them. Because we've all hit really low points. Yeah.
And I think it's knowing where to go with that and knowing having someone safe that can tell you the right information and being able to do that. And
being able to communicate and talk to other people.
Yeah, for sure. I think we have another question over here too.
I've made a point not to ask my son's younger sibling to help very much with taking care of him, and I was just wondering if you could make a comment about how you feel about that. Do you mind being asked to help, or I don't know.
Yeah, and I think it's something that's changed over time too. If you'd asked me when I was 13 if I wanted to help, no. As I got older.
You can do the dishes yourself.
Yeah, you're fine. And also, I know my brother, I know his limits. I'm not going to help you if I don't think you need it. But I think there's a difference between being told to help and being asked to help. And I think there's a difference between being asked to help and being able to help on your own. And I think at different points, if there's something that needs to be done and I need to help, that's fine. I wouldn't, looking back, I wouldn't have been upset. I probably was in the moment, but I wouldn't have been upset if my parents had asked me for something. And then I did get to a point where I was able to help. And I know one of my other brothers, I have a lot of siblings actually. I have one Duchenne brother and two other brothers and a little sister too. But one of my non-Duchenne brothers is going home to watch my brother Duchenne for the weekend while my parents are out of town. And so I think as you grow older, there's a much different sibling relationship for anyone. But I think it kind of goes back to what Dylan said. there are times when you just need to be a kid, and that's true for Duchenne, boys with Duchenne, and that's true for siblings too. Of like, there are times where, you know, I think it's tough to be expected to be, you know, any kind of primary caregiver. Granted that all families look different, and I understand we can't account for all of that, but I think it's important that, you know, siblings without Duchenne have that time to themselves too, and don't get dragged into the caregiving.
I became a caregiver out of necessity because me and my brother are so close in age. When he went to high school, he didn't have anyone to help him. So I was on standby to help him use the bathroom. And that's still the only job that he trusts me to do. And he barely trusts me to do that. I think I can hold a urinal by now. I keep telling him, like, believe it or not, I graduated college. Like, I kind of know what I'm doing, you know? But no, I still do it wrong. And I'm sure all of y'all have heard that before. Like, you're doing it wrong, you're doing it wrong. It's like, okay, let's take a step back and, like, you know, let's try to figure it out. But really, I became one out of necessity. And I think there are times in everyone's lives where something like that might happen. And for the most part, I think, you know, we wouldn't be, you know, mad or upset, you know, later on, you know, that we had to help our brother use the bathroom or had to watch him for a little bit when we could have gone out with friends. It's something that just kind of happens. And I guess it's not as big as an issue, at least for me, as, you know, like being worried about, you know, should I ask him to help or not?
Yeah. And I think it's so individual to each family too, and it's down to the dynamic that is already there, and it's down to, you know, what the needs are and what the asks are. But I think it comes down to, you know, when there's opportunities to help, the difference between being told and being asked, it can be huge.
I think a gender relationship is a factor in there as well.
Yeah.
We didn't necessarily touch on that, but I think it's a lot different between a brother-to-brother relationship versus a sister-to-brother.
Yeah, definitely.
Good. All right, well, thank y'all for listening to us talk, and hope y'all learned some valuable stuff. If y'all have any more questions, please feel free to find us outside of conference, and I'm sure we'll be happy to answer them. All right.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thank y'all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.